Some moments don't fade with time. They settle into the mist, waiting to be remembered. Welcome to Haze and Hue. Stay with me as I paint and tell the story of a golden bird, a sleeping meadow, and the memories held quietly in the morning mist. The meadow had always greeted the sun with open arms. Its long grasses swayed gently in the morning breeze. Birds stirred lazily in the trees, and a pale haze would lift with the dawn, giving way to colours that stretched far and wide. But today, something was different. The fog had not moved. It curled low across the meadow like a slumbering thought, draped heavily over every reed, every petal, every blade of grass. Normally, the mist rose with the sun, evaporating into the golden sky by the time the dew has dried. But not this morning. The sun had crept upward, golden and warm, and still the fog remained, motionless, as though unwilling to be disturbed. Luma noticed it first. She was a small bird, golden-feathered, with eyes like polished amber. She made her home beneath the curve of an old bent reed near the edge of the water, a place where dragonflies often skimmed and frogs sang at dusk. Each morning she took to the sky with soft, slow wing beats, tracing her path across the meadow to make sure everything was in its place. But this morning her feathers felt heavy with the fog. The air pressed around her gently, as though it had weight, not unpleasant, but strange, like being inside a dream one couldn't wake from. She fluttered higher, her wings cutting slow arcs through the pale greyness. Normally, the sunrise lit the water like spilled amber. Today, it was like flying through milk. She wasn't alarmed. Not yet. The meadow had moods, after all. Some days it whispered, some days it sulked. But there was something in the stillness that made her curious, something unspoken. She landed on a crooked branch beside a shallow pool and waited. Nothing stirred. The usual morning symphony was subdued. No rustle of hairs in the underbrush, no soft conversations between sparrows. Even the insects seemed muted. It was not an unfriendly stillness, but it held the sense of something paused, as if the whole meadow were holding its breath. Luma cocked her head and listened. And then movement. It was small, barely there. Just at the edge of the clearing, something shifted behind the trees. Not quickly, not threatening, just present. Another figure. This one taller and standing very, very still. Luma hovered briefly in the air, wings beating in slow rhythm. The figure was not a creature she recognized, not one of fur or feather. It was something older than that, a shimmer, a silhouette, the outline of presence more than form. She blinked. Gone. Only the fog remained. Her feathers prickled, not with fear, but with a strange, sweet anticipation. Something was held in the mist today, something that wanted to stay hidden. Luma settled back onto the branch and looked out over the meadow. She would wait and watch and see what the fog would do. The hours passed slowly. The light shifted as the sun climbed higher, and yet the fog did not lift. It clung to the earth with a kind of patient persistence. Luma flew loops above the tallest flowers, her wing beats making small waves through the fog. Each pass revealed the same soft veil, no clearer, no thinner, no change. She perched upon a fern, its fronds beaded with dew, and considered the feel of the air against her chest. It was cooler than usual, calmer, but not peaceful, like a lull that wasn't ready to end. Nearby, a patch of moss-covered stone caught her eye. It looked familiar, but something about its texture shimmered oddly, as if it were more memory than matter. Luma flew down and touched it with her beak. A ripple formed, subtle and soundless, like a sigh beneath a pond's surface. She stepped back. The ripple faded. The fog responded, not with movement, but with something stranger. A scent, wild thyme, clover, and something faintly sweet, a scent she hadn't smelled in seasons. Her heart beat a little faster. She turned toward the western edge of the meadow, where the reeds grew tallest and the air always seemed to listen. She'd once watched a young fox cub play here in the spring. She remembered how the mist used to dance lightly then, never clinging, never pressing. Today it hung like a heavy veil. Luma flew low, skimming just above the grass. Beneath her, the meadow felt different. She noticed slight depressions in the earth, not tracks, more like impressions, echoes. There was a circle near the edge of the pond, a worn-down ring in the grass where something had once stood often. She'd never noticed it before. As she hovered, she thought she saw the faintest image from within it. A pair of shoes, child-sized, then gone. She blinked. The fog was showing her something. Or perhaps it wasn't the fog at all. Perhaps it was the meadow. Perhaps it remembered. Luma felt a stirring in her chest. Not fear, not even sadness, something softer, as if she'd stumbled upon somebody else's reverie and was being asked, kindly, not to step too loudly. She moved gently from the pond's edge to the stone circle, from the stone to the tall grass path, and everywhere she saw more of them, flickers, outlines, impressions. A scarf fluttered from an unseen hand, a hat tossed into the breeze. The faintest sound of humming, tuneless and steady, all of it barely there, and all of it waiting. She landed on the branch of an old tree, one that leaned ever so slightly over the path, and tucked her wings in. She would watch, she would listen, and she would learn what the mist had kept. The mist shifted, not in movement, but in meaning. It was no longer simply clinging to the land, it was embracing it, and within its folds, Luma could now sense a pulse. Not a heartbeat, but something rhythmic, like a memory breathing. She left her perch and flew slowly, her wings barely disturbing the air. As she passed over the pond again, She looked into the water. No reflection met her gaze. The surface was matte and pale, absorbing light instead of giving it back. The world had become a canvas on which something unseen was being painted. Luma circled wider, venturing toward the edge of the meadow where the grasses gave way to thickets of elderberry and curled bramble. There she had once watched children picking berries in late summer, staining their fingers purple and laughing when the juice dribbled down their chins. She had not thought of them in many seasons, and yet she saw them. Not fully, not clearly, just outlines, movement without mass, a flicker of colour. The sound of laughter layered thinly beneath the stillness. She hovered. The fog thickened around them and the scene faded, but the feeling remained, like the lingering sweetness of berries on the tongue. She pressed on. To the north, she came to a patch of old thistles, now half covered in the pale film of mist. A windmill once stood there, tall and proud, creaking gently with each gust. It had long since fallen to time, its wooden bones now lost to ivy. But as she floated near, the sound came again, creaking, rhythmic, slow. The windmill turned. In the fog, it reassembled itself, not physically, but perceptually. One moment the land was bare, the next full of shape. She could almost hear a door slam, a kettle whistle, the tread of boots across the floorboards of a memory. Luma felt her heart ache with something unnameable. It was all here, layered beneath the surface of things. Not ghosts, not spirits, not haunting, just remembering. The mist had become a vessel, catching pieces of lives lived and holding them delicately, like feathers that had floated down too slowly to land. She landed near a hollow where a ring of mushrooms grew in a perfect circle. As she touched down, she heard a song, not from the present, but from a time long vanished. A lullaby, a hum, a voice with the softness of age and the warmth of love. Sleep now, little one, don't be afraid. The stars will keep watch as dreams are made. The voice faded. Luma stood still for several minutes, feathers pressed tightly to her frame. She could almost see the arms that had once cradled a baby beneath a sky like this. The moss cradled echoes of footprints now long gone. She flew again, faster now, as if led. The glimmers came more frequently. Laughter, footsteps, the rustle of skirts, the clink of a metal pail against stone, a child calling for a dog that no longer barked. Each moment rose from the land like warmth from sunlit soil, and each one faded just as softly. She reached the hill at the edge of the meadow, an old knoll overgrown with wild chamomile and wiry grass. From there she had a wider view, though much was still veiled. She landed in a crook between stones and tucked her feet beneath her, eyes wide. She watched. The meadow shimmered faintly in waves, like breath passing through silk. And within that shimmer, images coalesced and dissolved. A farmer waving goodbye, a dog sleeping beside a sand-drenched rock, a girl kneeling to pick flowers, all of them so real, and yet not. The fog was not only holding on, it was becoming these memories. Luma didn't know how long she watched. The sun had climbed higher, but its light was filtered and dulled. She knew the time of day had changed, only because the shadows beneath the trees had shifted slightly. Eventually she rose and flew toward the willow grove. It was the oldest place in the meadow, where roots wove through soil like a memory beneath every season. As she entered, the air grew cooler still. The mist here felt denser, less like fog, more like breath held just before words are spoken. And then a heartbeat, or perhaps not a sound, but a rhythm. She felt it in her breast, in the branches, in the roots. A presence. She landed on a fallen trunk and folded her wings. Something here remembered her. She looked down. There, carved faintly into the bark, nearly obscured by moss, were shapes. Not letters, not symbols, just grooves where a small hand had once pressed. She touched one gently with her beak. The grove sighed. From the mist, a figure emerged, not clearly, not fully, but tenderly. A boy, perhaps 10 years old, running with arms outstretched, spinning beneath the low branches, his laughter trailing behind him like ribbon. Behind him, an older woman, watching, smiling. Her form faded before her expression did. Luma watched. The grove showed her more. A picnic blanket, a sketchbook, someone humming a tune while carving a spoon. A firefly drifting lazily through the reeds. All of it layered, all of it waiting. And still the fog remained. Luma now understood. This fog had grown too fond of remembering. It had become a keeper, not of things that should be held forever, but of feelings that once moved freely. The fog was trying to preserve what was never meant to be still. And in doing so, it was holding back the life still unfolding in the meadow, the new footsteps, the new songs, the laughter that hadn't yet happened. She looked out beyond the grove. There in the distance, the edges of the meadow shimmered faintly. Bees hovered near thistle blooms, unsure. A fawn poked its head from a glen, blinking into the pale. All of nature was paused, uncertain, like an orchestra waiting for the conductor's hand. And Luma, small and golden, took a breath. The mist needed help, not force, not disruption, but permission. Permission to let go. She would carry the message, not in words, not in song, but in presence. She launched gently from the trunk, arcing high into the mist. As she rose, the fog parted slightly around her, drawn not to her light, but to her understanding. She flew loops through the grove, tracing circles like an invisible wind. The figures below watched her, not with eyes, but with memory. She circled back toward the pond, then to the stone, then to the path with the worn ring. She touched each place gently with her wings, not to erase, but to acknowledge. I see you, her flight seemed to say. I remember, and it's okay. From above, the meadow looked softer now, as if the fog had relaxed just slightly. Luma paused in midair, wings held wide, and hovered over the heart of the field. The stillness paused once more, then settled. She did not need to do more. The rest would come, slowly, naturally, like petals unfolding. Morning had long passed, and though the sun climbed higher, its golden light remained diffused. The fog no longer pressed in, but lingered softly, curious, cautious, like a visitor on the verge of farewell. Luma flew slowly now, not out of fatigue, but intention. She traced the outer edges of the meadow, watching how the fog began to peel away in places. Not all at once, not completely, but here and there, like a veil loosening. Shadows began to return beneath the trees. A flicker of colour lit the tops of petals. The world was waking, unsure, stretching limbs it had held still for too long. She landed near the water's edge, where cattails swayed and dragonflies often danced. Today the dragonflies remained hidden, but she could sense them, waiting, watching. The pond, once pale and opaque, had begun to mirror the sky again. It was not a perfect reflection, still dappled by mist, but it was enough to show her shape as she looked down. She saw herself, small, golden, steady. She dipped her wingtip into the surface. The ripple spread wide. Across the meadow, a slow wind stirred. It rustled through tall grass and brushed against old stones. It passed through the ring of mushrooms and wove between trees in the willow grove. As it moved, the fog shifted. It did not resist. It danced. The fog rose, slightly, softly, like breath after long stillness. It curled upwards around trunks and reached toward the sky in long ribbons, not vanishing, but lifting, transforming. The meadow responded in kind. Petals unfolded, leaves turned. A single bee emerged and landed gently on a dandelion. Luma watched as the weight of remembering turned into something new, something lighter, not gone, not lost, but changed. She flew once more toward the grove, and there she saw them again, the figures, but they no longer lingered. They moved with the mist ascending gently, not like a rising storm, but like dreams slipping into sky. The boy running beneath the trees, the woman who watched him, the child with the berry-stained smile, they faded upward, dissolving into warmth, and with them the fog lifted further. Not every memory had left. Some remained tucked within soil, within bark and stone and pond water. But now they rested more lightly. Their longing had eased. She returned to the bent reed where her nest lay. The branch dipped beneath her weight, familiar and kind. The fog still touched the tips of grass, but now it shimmered, no longer heavy, no longer unsure. Luma looked down across the meadow. Life had returned. Not all at once, but as it was meant to. Slowly, softly. A deer stepped delicately into the clearing. A pair of finches called to one another from opposite branches. The stillness had become movement again, not noise, not chaos, just presence, and presence was enough. High above, the mist formed long threads across the sky, silver strands catching the morning light. They drifted slowly, changing shape as they went. Memories becoming part of the wind, the clouds, the space between things. Luma sang then, not to call, not to warn, but to mark the moment. Her notes were low and wide, full of pause and space. Not every note followed the last, and some seemed to vanish as they rose, but each one meant something. It was a song for letting go, for remembering and continuing, for change that doesn't erase. She flew one final loop above the heart of the field. As she passed, the wind followed, gentle and cool. The grasses bent, the petals turned, the world listened. She carried no burden, she held no sorrow. She was simply part of the pattern now. The Mist Keeper. Not a guardian of what must be kept, but one who understands what can be released. Thanks for spending this quiet moment with me. If a memory came to mind while listening, I'd love if you shared it. Until next time, let the quiet moments inspire you.